So we've had a lovely journey down the M1. We're now crossing the M25 Dartford crossing in our 1990 Rover GSI 216. Let's hope we get a nice week. The rain has just stopped nicely as we come across the bridge here. Today we've come to Ramsgate after an aborted attempt to Margate, which we found particularly run down and horrible. This nice Georgian, almost crescent-like building we've walked past, right next to the beach. And the beach with the harbour seems to be connected by this lift, which sadly is not running at the moment because we're slightly out of season. Right next to the lift there are the roofs of the houses with the chimney pots rather nicely decorated. And look, you can look down into their backyards. Let's walk down into Ramsgate itself. We eventually found some stairs going down to the beach. So with the lift not working, we've made our way down to quite a pretty little area around the back of the harbour. And we're currently stood beneath this obelisk, which was put up in recognition of George IV embarking from here and selecting it as a royal port. So this is Ramsgate Harbour, and presumably the old custom house. And then we move round to the Victoria Pavilion, and then we've got the Street to Crescent further up on the hill with the lift that's not in use. And then we have the beach. We think this beach in Ramsgate is a very similar location to some pre-war footage that's taken in black and white by my grandfather and these two children's great grandparents. The age-old art of bury your sister was also carried out on the beach. Even the sea was enjoyed. We also went to look at Ramsgate tunnels. And this used to be a railway tunnel. Two different railways actually. The tunnels now house a museum to the various wartime activities. Today it's a little bit more rainy and not quite so nice weather, so we've come down to Canterbury Cathedral. This is reportedly England's first cathedral, and of course is still the lead church for the Church of England today. So let's go and have a look around. The main nave stands tall with its vaulted ceilings and Gothic arches down the side. Along with a rather decorative pulpit. And then the stonework that cuts across is at the base of the central tower. This smaller, darker section of the church, which includes the top altar, is the part they use for the main services. The ceiling's a little bit lower and a little bit plainer. This wall painting dates from the medieval period in the mid-1400s and depicts the legend of St. Eustace. The surviving cloisters give a very good, nice view of the central tower. We found a cathedral craftsman, a stonemason, putting the letters into a memorial, traditionally by hand, pleasure to watch. At the Beanie Institute, this beautiful building houses some lovely exhibitions for children. Let's go and look. Inside we found a small films gallery dedicated to people like Noggin the Nog, Ivor the Engine, Basil Brush, the Clangers, and the delight that is Bagpuss. Fond childhood memories of watching these on TV. There was also an exhibition of Rupert the Bear. Rupert was a cartoon created by Canterbury artist Mary Tortel in 1920. Can you spot any Rupert memorabilia you might have had when you were a child? I remember these annuals and folding paper, as well as reading these books at junior school. We've stopped on the way home at Manson to visit the Spitfire and Hurricane Memorial. Inside the History Museum at Manson is this little Oster, which is being restored to airworthy condition. I know the Oster because Biggles used to use them in his books. One display actually had the remains of a bouncing bomb. Never seen this before. Outside there was an English electric lightning, which I always find is a rather vertical, funny looking machine, and never saw one actually flying. Of car interest, this Alvis Leonese engine was on display. This was used in the early hovercraft, the SNR-1, and then later in helicopters. This massive Mark 8 torpedo has an interesting history, and I hadn't realised that one of its last uses was to sink the General Belgrano. We also visited the Spitfire and Hurricane Memorial Museum, which inside contains a 1944 Hurricane and a Mark 6 Spitfire. The museum was free to enter. It was a delightfully welcoming little place with lots of information around the walls. Broadstairs has got a lovely little beach, which looks nicely looked after. Came to Broadstairs to look for the old funicular and found this pub called the Funicular. A friend of ours also recommended we ought to get an ice cream from Morelli's, a local traditional ice cream family that have been here for years. Finally, today we've come to Quecks Park, where there's a ring of 12 in this rather peculiar secular tower. As we're all ringers, we're going to ring tonight for the practice. And I've wanted to ring here since I was a little boy and saw the tower written up in the ringing world. It's a completely secular brick-built tower that had a set of bells put in it in 1819. We found the Whitstable Museum and went inside this tiny door to access a much larger museum inside. This is the 1830 built Invicta, built by Robert Stevenson, immediately sequentially after the rocket. The coupling rods are of similar design to those of Lion, which is a little bit later, but the wheels are coupled, unlike Rocket. The driver's controls are a lot more simplistic than locomotion. It was built as a moving locomotive to travel 1¼ miles, and then the train was transferred to the winding engines. Outside there's the remains of one of the winding engines, which have been cosmetically restored. And so homeward bound, covering 435 miles and using 1 tank of fuel. No issues, and the car created lots of stares and comments. A relaxing few days.